This type of episode of The Balance, what we try to talk about is the good, the bad, different ways about going about it. Life is very much like that, right? Things don't go according to plan. You've got to switch things up, and you always have to be consistently improving. And one of the things that the space industry really is going to have to learn how to improve is with this private industry taking such a big chunk of the workload in such a very boisterous fashion, right? There's always been private and public back and forth for space progress. NASA hasn't been the manufacturer of every single thing, right? There's been private contractors involved at every stage. We've seen with both SpaceX and with Blue Origin, they bring with them a bigger part of the private industry. And what we saw with this HLS drama is part of that, right? Part of private industry is using lawyers and the legal system to make it so that you get certain contracts, so that even though one company may have actually had a better solution, someone with better lawyers could get that passed, and then that company either has a chance to compete or that company takes that entire project from the other person. That's an unfortunate balance that we have to figure out with the space program. And it's not that the public sector hasn't had that issue before. I mean, look at SpaceX's first attempt at trying to get into the industry and break the monopoly that the big companies, the big private companies and contractors had doing work for NASA and launching things into space for the military. SpaceX was literally by some of the most decorated astronauts who were involved politically basically told to sit down. They don't know what they're doing. They don't deserve to be there. These bigger companies have been through the ringer. They've worked with NASA. And that, I mean, there's interviews of Elon Musk in tears describing what that was like. Elon Musk, one of the most unemotional men on the planet. He was deeply, deeply affected by that. And, of course, now he's on the other side of this and has definitely won over NASA with their engineering and what they've been able to do to revolutionize the space industry. So I guess my point is there is a good and a bad to the private industry having a larger stakehold in space operations. And if I'm going to channel Yoda here, the future is definitely cloudy. I can't quite see what could come of this, and there's a lot more that the private industry could affect to potentially slow down or greatly improve the space travel and space access that we all have. Which brings us to space stations. So to really get this next stage that NASA is trying to do, which is to have a sustainable and continuous human presence, make human space travel something that's consistent and that's available and is a lot safer and is just set up to do that, space stations are going to be required. And it's definitely not something that NASA can just do by themselves. Funding will be appropriated, of course, but NASA only has so much, right? If you fund something too little, you have the potential of not having anything by the end of it, which is part of the reason why the HLS contract was given solely to SpaceX, right? So with these new space stations, it's not surprising to me that we have different options like Orbital Reef, which is a Blue Origin company that is looking to revolutionize commercial space stations. And it's really interesting when I took a look at it, how in-depth this goes. And Orbital Reef was released on Twitter, and they were promoting it a little bit before it was either before or exactly around the time that they found out that the HLS contract was going to SpaceX, and that the actual, I guess, what was the word they were using for it? I'm blanking on this right now, but basically their protest. When Blue Origin's protest failed, they already had this Orbital Reef idea in play. And so Orbital Reef is, as they say here, Orbital Reef will be the premier mixed-use space station in low Earth orbit for commerce, research, and tourism by the end of this decade. Now, that is a very big goal. Blue Origin having this company that's going to, by 2030, have this space station operational and actually bringing in customers. As it says here, designed for use cases and ideas never before possible, Orbital Reef unlocks LEO, low Earth orbit, by reducing cost and complexity for new kinds of customers. We provide end-to-end services, standard interfaces, and technical support needed by spaceflight novices, planning, payload development, training, transportation, data analysis, and security for your people or payloads or both. And it's really interesting to see how many different companies are involved in this. We've got Blue Origin, Sierra Space, which I'm a huge fan of. Sierra Space has the Dream Chaser spacecraft, which is like a miniature space shuttle. It's one of the options I was really rooting for early on, and I'm really glad to see it's such an integral part of Orbital Reef. Boeing will be a part of this with the CST-100 Starliner. RedWire, which is a company that's acquired a lot of different companies like Made in Space, who we've talked about before. There is also ASU will be involved in this as well, where they'll have these academic teams, students putting together projects and working together with Orbital Reef to actually implement some of this stuff. And there's other companies involved in this as well. Genesis Engineering Solutions. And it's interesting if you look at like the capabilities that all of these companies have together. It's very exciting. It really could be a great option. My concern is the focus. I'm concerned about the focus of all of these different companies that had different ideas and people involved that thought they were going to do different things. I guess my concern up front of this is how much of this is a bunch of companies getting together because as one they couldn't do it, but together they can, and how much of this is just a way for Blue Origin to fill the gaps that they don't have. That's going to be a challenge in itself, getting all these companies to work together, different cultures, different ways that people work together. That is a Herculean effort in itself to get all of the employees and the different companies to work together to achieve something that's already difficult to do. Other first things, again, this is only the beginning of the decade, so I will give some slack here, but a lot of the stuff that's being demonstrated and being shown here on Orbital Reef, again, it could be really early, but it's all animated, it's all theoretical, and I'm open to see what happens, but right now it seems like this will be their next step. It looks like for Blue Origin, as they develop New Glenn, which is the next stage up from New Shepard, which they were using now to send people to the edge of space, where they sent William Shatner recently, along with the other two crews. Jeff Bezos and his brother went into space. New Glenn is the next stage where they'll actually be able to launch heavy payloads, which I would assume they will be launching Orbital Reef on. And there's a lot of other things that will come along with this. Some things that have been developed currently, we've talked about Made in Space. Made in Space has additive manufacturing that has actually been used on the International Space Station. They have things like the Archinaut, which is something that could actually fix and repair things in space. It could 3D print and create things in the vacuum of space and then attach it to other things. I think the Archinaut could be a really, really important thing to add to any spacecraft or vessel that's out there, right? If you have something you can deploy like an Archinaut that you could repair and adjust your mission as you go, these Orbital Reef space stations, or any space station, doesn't have to be Orbital Reef, and even spacecraft could evolve on their mission, right? Because right now you're stuck with what you have currently, and other than software updates, there's really nothing that you can do to change your mission. But if you're going along the way and you decide that maybe we need to mount a certain sensor a different way, or who knows what else you might need to do, having something like an Archinaut, an additive technology ability, gives you the ability to change on the fly, which could be really, really important. for everything else that I see, it's exciting, but I really am concerned about the cohesiveness of this. But that's not for me to decide. That's for Blue Origin and the rest of these companies to find a way to work together. And I wish them luck. I mean, look, we need technologies like Orbital Reef, and we need a bunch of different ways to do this. You know, these inflatable stations where they literally launch up something that's compact, they release it, and it inflates into an actual place that you could live and work. Bigelow Aerospace sent one up to the International Space Station where they tested a small version of it. They expanded it, and they were testing. They might even still be testing it, but we're basically checking to see, like, does this last? Can we hold this at pressure? Is it able to perform as good as a rigid structure? Because that opens up the ability. It opens up so many different opportunities for us to send things into space if we can send something that's a little bit more compact. So, I guess my point of all of this is, while Blue Origin may have lost the HLS contract, they are definitely not out of the picture. And Blue Origin has a lot of work ahead of them. We're already starting to see New Glenn be processed in Blue Origin station down in Florida. And it'll be interesting to see that fly for the first time. And, they'll also be doing reusable spacecraft. And, there's a lot of really smart people at Blue Origin and at these other companies that would be a part of either RedWire or Orbital Reef, Sierra Space, Boeing. There's a ton of smart people out there, and it's about the entire company like an organism working together for survival. And I wish this Orbital Reef team all the best, because this is a big project that they could win an even bigger contract for from NASA. But there's a long, long road ahead of them to do that. The other thing, too, is Jeff Bezos has more money than God and could probably fund this whole landing system if he wanted to do it himself. The question is that part of his business plan? Is he willing to invest that much money into something that is not necessarily going to have a return? But Blue Origin not getting the HLS contract is definitely not a death blow like it would have been for many other space programs and other billionaires that have tried to make rocket companies before. So Jeff Bezos has got the money. He's got Lex Luthor-like money. So this is not the end of Blue Origin or Jeff Bezos. And we will be paying attention in the background. And we wish them luck. Look, Orbital Reef could be great. Orbital Reef could be a really interesting, amazing way to bring companies together so that competition is less of a killer for the space program. I'm all about that, right? I'm all about having more companies come together to achieve these goals instead of making it so that other companies can't compete. The one balance to that is that I hope that if Orbital Reef is successful, it doesn't become another monopoly that then tries to kick out other competitors. But that's not the first time we've seen that in the space industry, so it would not be a surprise. But those are my thoughts for this week. Thank you for joining us on Today in Space. As always, you know what to do. Subscribe, like the episode, share with friends, follow us if you aren't already. You could follow us on Today in Space Pod on Instagram and Twitter, AG3D Printing on Instagram for all of our 3D printing needs. Last week we showed off our SpaceX Starman helmet that we 3D printed ourselves, bringing our own ideas into reality. We have our Etsy shop, ag3dprinting.etsy.com, where you can get gifts that we've designed, a lot of board game stuff, a lot of fun gifts, especially for the holidays coming up. And anything that you purchase there helps fund this podcast, allows us to do more things. And, as always, just spread the word. That's one of the biggest things you can do. Subscribe to the show, like it. They're free, easy ways to support us if you can't financially do that. And if you do want to bring your idea into reality, if you've got this idea that you're like, hey, I want to make this happen. I don't have all this money to figure it out, but I just want to see if it's real. I want to make this thing that I've tried to design. Can you make it for me? That's what we specialize in. We specialize in iterative design and literally bringing people's ideas from paper to in your hands, just like we have with our rocket ship phone stand, heavily inspired by the Starship. But I digress. That's it, folks. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back for another episode of Today in Space. Make sure to let us know if you have any ideas for future episodes. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, we'll keep pressing forward.